The MacBook Air is Apple's most popular laptop for a reason. It does most things most people do very well while being light, portable, well made and not too expensive. Around a year ago, Apple released a redesigned MacBook Air with the M2 chip, and now they have also made it available in a 15-inch version. Over the past year, I've been using this as my personal computer for a while. Now I have it as my work computer. So let's see how it's held up and if it's still a good buy this back to school season.
Favorite color, money green. Paper. I've been on my grind since I was in the 7th grade. Had my first kid, I was only 17. Always a provider for my pack like Wolverines.
Alright, so let's start off with a quick conclusion. If you don't do very intensive tasks like audio, video work that's very intensive, or also maybe 3D graphics or whatever else you might be doing, this is probably the best laptop for you right now. It's more than fast enough for all of the non-pro work you would do on a laptop, and it will be for the next couple of years. For the configuration, I can recommend you to get the 8GB of memory, 512GB SSD, because I think the 256 is just not enough storage in 2023, and it's also a little bit slower. If you want to spec this up even further and get like 16 or 24GB of memory, I would honestly just consider the MacBook Pro 14 or 16 because they get pretty close in price and still have a lot more to offer if you are into more professional workflows. In terms of the size, I would personally lean towards the 15-inch. I have not really tried it out for myself, but I've seen it in store and it's almost the same to the 13-inch except for the bigger screen. And I always like a bigger screen on the go, and I still felt like it felt really portable and not too heavy. So if you don't absolutely need the smaller size, I would recommend you to go for the 15-inch. But in general, just go for whatever size you like better. And as I said, I recommend 8GB of memory, 512GB of SSD if we're going for the MacBook Air. Alright, so let's get into more detailed pros and cons. First up, I want to start with all of the cons for this laptop. So I think the screen is just not up to the same quality as the MacBook Pro. That's especially visible if you see the blacks on the MacBook Pro 14 or 16. They're just more black because it's a newer technology in terms of the display. Also, the MacBook Air display is not as sharp. It's 224 pixels per inch versus 254, which doesn't seem like a big difference, but the big difference is that the scaled resolution of the MacBook Pro, so that's what's actually shown on the screen, is exactly half of the actual display resolution, while the MacBook Air does something that's called non-integer scaling. That means that it's not like just the actual display resolution times 2, and instead what is displayed is something else. So I'm just gonna show both here on screen and you'll see what I mean. So that means it's not really divided evenly, which takes up a little bit more performance and just doesn't look as sharp in general. Additionally, the screen also has bigger bezels, which is not really a huge issue, but if you have seen the MacBook Pro, you will notice that the bezels on the MacBook Air just look worse and a little bit thick, especially on the smaller 13-inch model. Another con that's just for the 13-inch model, which I've noticed in using this, if you don't have an external display, honestly, I feel like it's a little bit too small. I mean, if you're using a 13.3-inch older MacBook Air or MacBook Pro right now and you're okay with the screen size, then obviously this will be an upgrade for you. But in my personal use, I felt like whenever I was away from the monitor, the MacBook Air just felt too small, where even the 14-inch MacBook Pro felt kind of just over that line of being big enough. The MacBook Air, for me, just really has a small display, but as I said, if I would buy this personally, I would get the 15-inch now that it's out. Another con for me are the ports. So it has 2 USB-C ports, which honestly will be enough, and also the new MagSafe port. But it's just really bad that they're both on one side, so you can't really charge it from both sides. And also, this will probably not apply to you if you're looking into the MacBook Air, but it doesn't have an SD card and HDMI slot, which can be handy sometimes, but honestly you probably know whether you need that or not and if it's something that's important to you. Additionally, the performance is great, and I will talk about it in the Pro section, but it's not that much faster than the M1, so the M1 is still a better deal if you're just looking for the best value for money. And the last negative point for me are the speakers. Actually, they are okay, but I didn't feel like they were much better than the MacBook Air M1 before, and also compared to the 14-inch, which of course has a thicker body but still is very close in size, and you can really notice the difference compared to the MacBook Air M2. The 15-inch MacBook Air M2 seems to be much better, and I've seen some comparisons where it seemed like it's more closer to the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So this doesn't apply if you're going for the 15-inch, but for the 13-inch, I was kind of disappointed by the speakers. That being said, they are not bad in any way, they're just not really an upgrade over the M1 model. Alright, so let's talk about the pros, and there's a lot to talk about. First up, I really like this design. It's so thin and portable, and it just feels like you can pick this up all the time and take it everywhere you want because it's so light. It's lighter than an iPad Pro, 12.9 inch with a Magic Keyboard actually. So yeah, it's really light, and also the 15 inch for that screen size feels so small and portable. So that's really a great pro because like I think the MacBook Air is definitely a laptop made for students or people that really travel a lot, and this definitely delivers on that promise. It also feels like it's very well made and just feels very solid. Even though it's very light, it doesn't really bend or flex or anything. It feels very well made and durable, so I'm sure it's gonna hold up very well for a long time. The next pro for me, and I think this got kind of boring with Apple laptops, but it's still something I think I have to talk about. The battery life is just awesome. I mean, it has been awesome on all Apple laptops since the first M1 came out in 2020, but still, it's just so nice to not have to worry about battery on a normal work day at all. Like, you don't have to bring a charger if you go somewhere and you have it charged up before. So that's just something that's really great. Apple quotes like 18 hours of video playback, which I don't know if anyone just does 18 hours of straight video playback, but it just goes to show like how much you could use this before it runs out. And the M2 is really efficient, so this really feels like it has such a long battery life, even though it's so thin and light. And that battery life, especially if you're still on an Intel MacBook, it's just such a great quality of life improvement, and you're definitely gonna notice that every single day. Next up, the performance. I said that it's not that much faster than the M1, but that's really still a good thing because the M1 was already so fast. There is one use case where it is a lot faster than the M1, and that's in video exports. So I don't want to get too technical, but the M1 didn't have like the media engine, which is a specialized part of the chip that's on the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, which were in the MacBook Pro from 2021. And so it was a lot slower in video exports compared to those pro level chips. The M1 got the same hardware encoders, decoders that are in the media engine. And so it's very close in performance if you just compare video export times to the M1 or M2 Pro, because they all have the same so-called media engine. So yeah, I don't want to get too technical, but that's basically it. And so for video exports, it is a lot faster than the M1, and that's something you're gonna notice if you like to do like travel edits in iMovie or whatever. It's really gonna make your workflow go faster. And also the performance in general is just so great, especially if you're coming from Intel. This is gonna be such a huge upgrade. My work issued MacBook Air is a base model that's 8 GB of memory, 256 GB of SSD, and it's still so fast, even though with like a bunch of Chrome tabs open and everything you would do on a laptop like this. It's so fast at doing everything that's like not a pro workflow, and I'm sure it's gonna be very fast at all of that for bunch of years to come, so I wouldn't worry about the performance at all. It's so fast, and as I said, if you're still on an Intel MacBook, this is gonna totally blow your mind because like nothing ever is like choppy or laggy or anything, just all works, and that's great that MacBooks are now at that level. Also, the keyboard feels really nice to type on. I think it's because the body is so slim, like the bottom portion is so slim compared to the MacBook Pro, so I feel like it feels a little bit better actually than the MacBook Pro to type on this. It's a great keyboard. They don't have issues with the keyboard anymore, thankfully. They have abandoned the butterfly keyboard from the MacBook Pro 2016 to 2019. So keyboard is great. It feels really nice to type on. It also has a bigger Touch ID sensor compared to the MacBook Air M1. It feels nicer to use, and it's also insanely fast. So that's also a nice pro that you're gonna notice in everyday life. And last but not least, it does have a better webcam. It's still not great, but it's now 1080p. It's good enough for all video calls, I would say. I think it still looks weird to like have a video call on a laptop because it just always has this weird angle, but it looks much better compared to the MacBook Air M1 because that only had a 720p webcam, and this one is now at a very acceptable level. Alright, so overall, as I've talked about in the beginning also, there's a lot more pros than cons to this device, and for everyone that knows that they won't need like pro level performance, this is the best laptop ever. Of course, then the question becomes what really is pro level performance, and sometimes it's a very blurry line. The MacBook Air can do most of the things that you would do on a MacBook Pro, just not as quickly, and sometimes there's a big time difference, especially if you're doing intensive tasks for longer. So I would really only go for this in a very low spec, like 8 GB of memory version. If you know that you don't want to do video editing, you don't want to do a lot of graphics, or at least you only want to do these tasks only occasionally, then this will be the best MacBook for you, especially for students. I think this is going to be great. You can just pick the size you want and just be done with it. But now that this has been out for a year, the question also becomes if you should wait for the M3 version of this, because it's inevitably gonna come like sometime next year. And it's a really tough question because with tech like this, of course, something better is always around the corner, but if you need something right now, if your laptop slows you down every day in your workflow, I don't think it's worth waiting for another year just for the next model to come out. Because if this does everything you want it to do right now, then it will still do that next year. And the next model that comes out next year will not be so much better that it justifies you wasting your time with a slow laptop that slows you down right now. That being said, if you're thinking about upgrading and you're like on a MacBook Air M1, I think it can be worth waiting because you're not really in a rush then, and this will not be the biggest upgrade over the MacBook Air M1. So it really depends on your situation whether or not you should wait for another year. Just try to think about whether you need a laptop right now because yours slows you down in major ways or not. If you want to get the 15-inch version, I would just get it right now. It just got released, and I think it's usually best to buy tech as close to the release as possible because that's when you get like the longest lifespan out of it. Alright, so this has been my 1 year later review of the MacBook Air M2. Honestly, it's a great laptop. I really like it, and I hope I could help you out with sharing my thoughts after using it for a year. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.